One. I was driving down Highway 1 in California one night around 1 a.m. in the rain. I like hiking in the rugged coast at night. When I passed by a guy hobbling on the side of the road with a large pack and what looked like a farming hoe in one hand. A minute or so after passing by, I began to feel guilty because it was a winter storm and he was a few miles from the nearest town. So I turned around and went to ask him if he needed a ride. Well, after driving about 15 minutes looking for him and coming up short, I decided to get a move on back to my designated hiking beach for the night. While hiking for the 2 next hours, I felt like someone was watching me, and to make matters worse, the fog rolled in, so I had very limited vision. I also began to hear very distinct and solid footsteps in the sand a short distance from me. I'm no stranger to hikes or backpacking alone in the wilderness, but this night my hair stood on end, causing every slight wind to feel like a murmur of breath on my body. I jogged back to my car and decided to head home and grab some midnight grub. By the time I was back on the highway, the visibility was about 5 to 10 feet from the fog, and I started to feel my hair bristling on the back again while I drove. I recognized a sign and realized that I was near where I had originally seen the man that I assumed to be a vagrant. Something large was in the middle of the road, shrouded in the fog not too far ahead of me. Barely having the time to react from the visibility, I slam on the brakes, and my tiny Mazda 3 fishtails hard. The shape slowly reveals itself to be the vagrant, standing there with his farming hoe, smack dab in the middle of the damn road. He walked slowly towards my car while shaking his head and pointing at me, and then I started panicking. He reached for my window with his fingers flexed, similar to an animal clawing at something. And to make matters worse, his face was completely gaunt with a horrifyingly vapid expression. I said screw this and squeezed out every little bit of horsepower my Mazda could muster and floored it all the way home. I didn't tell anyone except for my girlfriend because I didn't want to be made fun of or called a liar. A month later, 2 of my friends called me at 2 a.m. after hiking together on a foggy night with a very similar story. Except this time, the guy tried to throw the hoe at my buddy's car. We filed a police report, but the cops never found anybody matching the description. We never found out who that guy was, and I will not be hiking on foggy nights ever again. Two. I've had quite a few weird things happen, some super surreal, but mostly just strange and rarely scary. The scariest weird thing I can think of is back when I was around 4. My grandfather lived on this lake in a sparsely populated spot in the middle of nowhere. Other people lived around on it too, and there were always people fishing, so it had a decent amount of activity. Anyway, one day when me and my dad were at the lake, I forgot why or what was going on, but I think we were grilling. At some point, he left to go back to the house, which was a couple of 100 yards back up the slope, down to the lake to get the food to throw on the grill, and he left me to watch it for the 5 minutes or so that he was gone. My mom and grandma were busy preparing the rest of the meal at the house. It was around dusk and the sun was setting. There was always this creepy noise coming from up in the trees around there that scared me, that started around dusk, and that was starting, and it really freaked me out. It sounded like an echoey hissing sound, like it was going through a concrete pipe. The lake itself is something like 2.5 miles long by 1.5 miles wide. What scared me so badly was that there was something happening on the other side about a mile away. I'm about 30 feet from the grill under the trees, between it and the foot of the dock, when something going on over there catches my attention. I go to the foot of the dock to check it out, still under the trees, when this really loud, buzzing, droning noise starts coming from the other side, and this bright, rectangular light with movie screen dimensions starts sweeping the far shore from the right to the left. We're talking major light going on from the shoreline to the tops of the 50-foot trees on the shore. The sun was almost totally gone and it was getting dark, but this thing was like the sun. I saw it disappear around a cove, which meant that it was going to start sweeping to the left of me and start coming my way. I panicked and started to run to the house, but quickly realized that I probably wouldn't make it before it swept where I was. So I turned back and ran to the front of the canoe storage shed and pulled the tarp back from the cart wheelbarrow that had some chopped wood in it, and I jumped under that and pulled the tarp over my head and stayed real quiet and didn't move. I heard my dad calling for me after what seemed like forever, and then found me hiding in the cart. He wasn't happy that I left my post. I'm not sure if he ever bought the story, but there didn't seem to be any missing time. To this day, I still don't know what happened. Three. Me and my friend volunteered to take some teenagers to the beach for a church event. We stayed for about a week in Florida. On our drive home, our gas gauge goes from half full to empty in about 10 minutes. We were confused, but blamed it on the old car and the fact that we were lugging a trailer behind us. We were in the middle of nowhere in a farming community, but luckily we see a gas station off of an exit. I don't remember which one. So we stop and fill up and get back on the road. 30 minutes later, our gas tank goes back to empty, and we know something's up. And the guy at the last gas station said that he was it for 50 plus miles. But then something absolutely wacky happens. We drive by the gas station again, the exact same one, with the same attendant. We fill up again and proceed to make it home with no issue. Somehow we teleported to the same gas station. 4. I once drove my family to Hot Springs, Arkansas to visit my parents. We stopped en route to visit some other relatives, and they told us about a shortcut through the woods, and we decided to take it because it was getting late. We drove in the pitch black, and suddenly something made me slam on the brakes because I couldn't see the road ahead. It just disappeared. Everyone freaked at me. But as my eyes resolved the situation ahead, I realized that I was on a boat loading ramp of some lake, pointing my headlights right in the black water. I'd been driving about 45 miles per hour. I almost drove my young family into a lake, and some little glitch of my eyesight saved all of us from drowning. 5. I deer hunt regularly. The property I hunt on is mine, so I know pretty much every crevice of my 115 acres. The spot I hunt 80% of the time is around a quarter-mile walk from my back door through some fields into a trail surrounded by pines. You make a left turn at the fork of the trail, and then in about 100 yards, my stand is off in some hardwoods. So here's what happened. One morning that was particularly foggy, I was walking to my stand. I had my headlamp on with a green filter. I walked through the woods, got to the fork, and then I went blank. Next thing I remember is being about a 15-minute walk to the right of the fork. When I realized where I was, I had a mini freak out, and I wondered just what I was doing and how I got there. I hadn't looked at my cell phone for the time, so I had no clue how long I was just standing there. But the sun was breaking, and I normally get to my stand 30 to 45 minutes before the break. Needless to say, this was a big event for me. After my moment, I went back to my original stand. This situation plagues me every time I hunt to this day. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the show. If you have a story to share, send us an email, like us on Facebook, share, like, and subscribe.